lumière du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
A majority of Americans feel that the country is out of control. That's according to a new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. The poll, which was conducted during the aftermath of George Floyd's death, and as the U.S. surpassed over 100,000 coronavirus deaths, found that 80% of Americans believe America is out of control. Only 15% say they think things are under control, and almost 6 in 10 voters say they are more concerned about the death of George Floyd and the actions of the police than they are about the violence that has broken out at times during recent protests. Broken down by party, that includes 81% of Democrats, 59% of independents, and 29% of Republicans. The NBC poll also has Joe Biden over Donald Trump nationally. Biden is ahead by 7 points, 49 to 42%. Those numbers are unchanged since April. And among voters living in those top battleground states, Joe Biden is up 8 points against the president, 50 to 42%. And more concerning for the Trump campaign specifically continues to be Michigan, a state that they've been worried about, as Jonathan Lemire has reported for some time. Well, in that state, President Trump trails Joe Biden by 12 points in the battleground state of Michigan in the newest Epic MRA poll. Biden sits at 53% to Donald Trump's 41% in the Great Lakes state. And among independents who usually decide Michigan's elections, Joe Biden leads Donald Trump by 40 percentage points, 63% to 23%. In 2016, of course, President Trump narrowly won Michigan by less than 1 percentage points. Donnie, my gosh, there are so many cross currents. The pandemic, which has now killed twice as many people than died in combat in Vietnam or died in combat during World War I, and those numbers continue to grow. And health officials fear these protests will cause those numbers to spike even more as we move forward. And then, of course, you have June the 1st, what happened on June the 1st in Lafayette Park. You know, you and I and Willie and Mika and everybody that's on this show, we always talk about how it's early. These polls are, and June is early. It's not March or April, but June still is early because of the belief that things can change in a week's time in American politics. But some of those numbers, if you look inside, some of those numbers with women, with people in the suburbs, with independents, those numbers are hardening, and over 3.5 years, not just over the past 3 weeks. And on the other side of it, these protests are engaging and energizing Black Americans in a way the Trump campaign was hoping Joe Biden could not. So it seems that from both sides, the white suburbs, that the educated voters, all of these women, all of these people that were running away from Donald Trump over the past 3 years, they were hoping that would be offset by getting 15-20% of the black vote, or by depressing the black vote. Right now, at least in June, in early June, none of that seems likely or even plausible.
I want to go back to Joe, to all of that, and that one number that 80% of this country thinks we are out of control. That concept of control is such an important thing that literally 4 out of 5 Americans think we are out of control. The president is out of control. Also, I'm sure you're going to get to this a little bit later, a Political Morning Consult poll, just about 70% think we are seriously on the wrong track. Those are stunning numbers, whether you're in March, April, May, June, July, or August. Those are powerful, powerful numbers. And the thing that I think plays so against the president, everybody's been so worried about Joe Biden. Is he the right guy? I think he's the perfect guy. He is comfort. We have a drunk driver. He's the designated driver to get us home. Right now, if I was going to use one word to describe the entire populace of this country, it's anxious. We are all anxious. We watched last Monday, and I think that was the pinnacle. That was the crescendo. We keep saying, wow, it can't get any worse. Trump cannot dig a deeper grave. He did last Monday when he stepped up to the American people and said, if you disagree with me, I will dominate you. I will have the military by my side. Oh, and by the way, God is on my side also, as he stood there with the upside down Bible. So, the other numbers I want to just also point out, I always say follow the money. And in the futures betting market, where Wall Street, where the money is betting, interestingly enough, Trump is trailing by 7 points, the same number that's in all the national polls. So no matter what metric you look at, Trump is in desperate trouble. And what's interesting, you talked about this also at the top of the hour, that the Trump people are starting to think about, what is our slogan? Is it renewal? Is it the comeback kid? You can't slogan your way out of this. And that is a big, big, big problem for a guy who's built his entire raison d'etre on sloganing.
It is Monday, the 8th of June of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because we've had another one of those weekends and we've had to repurpose what was left over into a fine gourmet dish for your gourmet pleasure here in the salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What a weekend, huh? It seems like maybe the violence in most quarters of the nation during the protest are diminishing drastically as the police are going away, and the military too. Who would have thought that they would have been the cause of the riots? Will any of those cops or National Guardsmen or actual military personnel be held to account for the violence they perpetrated on folks? Let's hope so. One way to do that, I don't know, is defunding the police the way to go? Maybe they should be disbanded and we start over. Yes, maybe their budget should also be cut drastically. But defunding, I don't know. I've been hearing that's probably not the messaging we want to put out. Defunding, I don't know. I like the idea. It's not going to work because you still need a constabulary of sorts, won't you? So yeah, how about if we disband the police and start anew? And if you want to bring back good cops and you can't tell who the good cops are, why don't we start by testing for steroids, testing for psychological inclinations towards fascism? Or how about this? Actual associations and alliances with fascist white supremacist groups discovered through social media and other means. Everybody gets a background check when you're going to be a cop now. You abused an animal when you were a kid? Maybe they don't want you to be a cop. I know I wouldn't. Oh, they could have grown out of it. Well, did you beat some wives and girlfriends afterwards? I think that we need to have a total shakeout in our police departments. Every single one. Supervisors, all of them. The trainers, every single one. And I will once again reiterate, we start with drug testing for steroids and then other illegal substances too. But I think the roid rage is the primary culprit in a lot of these, shall we say, cops going off just like they're in a roid rage. It's not just like, they are. And the problem is that police chiefs pretty much by and large around the country, by and large, no pun intended, want their troops, is that what they call them? Troops, all buffed up. Okay? Doesn't matter that they're going to die from kidney disease or liver problems or heart problems, as long as they're bulky. Yeah, they like that look. Well, I'm sorry. The side effects are too dangerous, especially when 75-year-old guys are pushed down and then bleeding out their ears, and then the cops cheer the guys that push the old guy down. We don't need those types on our police forces anymore. And how about we change the whole name of police force to police service? I saw that on Daily Kos, and I think that's a great idea. They are police services, not a force. We need to stop this whole idea of us versus them. I was denied getting on to a San Francisco AM morning talk show because I proffered the possibility that maybe in the academies, the cops are being taught that we, the citizenry, are the enemy. And the producer said, "You approve?" Yeah. Do I approve? Look around. Well, this producer and that particular talk show host, who tended to be fairly right-wing, shall I interject, didn't believe in systemic racism then, and Bill Barr doesn't believe in systemic racism now. We had the guy, head of DHS on the morning talk show saying, systemic racism, no. It's only because the blacks have problems with the cops. Yeah, there's no systemic racism with that. All right? So, yeah, we have systemic racism. Bill Barr coming out and proclaiming that we don't is just proof that there is. I mean, remember what he said about the Mueller report and no Russian involvement? There was lots of Russian involvement to the point that Trump should have been charged with, I would say, treason. But you can't because he's a sitting president. Wow. Let's see if they would have done that for the black guy. Nah. They wanted to frog march him off for wearing a tan suit and using gray poupon. Uppity black guy. How dare he? So, we got that going for us, which is pretty weird. Protests have arisen around the world. Apparently, systemic racism is endemic not just to the United States, but recognized around the world, not just in the United States. A vast movement has arisen. I wonder what they're going to plan at Davos now. Wow. They could probably mitigate this whole issue if they worked on minimizing and negating their racism rather than arraying whole militaries against the people. Look, pitchforks and whatever, maybe that's working. But I think it's more than just pitchforks that are making these idiots heel to. All right, so white supremacists drove through some barricades, ran into protesters in Seattle, and shot a guy. And then he ran to the cops, and the cops surrounded him, took him away, and let him finish his cigarette. I wonder if they bought him a Burger King Whopper on the way to jail. I don't even think they took him to jail. So, yeah, I think we need to disband every single police department. Test every single one. And I don't mean that these cops get off scot-free just because we've disbanded the departments. Background checks for drug use, specifically steroids. You don't get off scot-free. You'll probably have to go through an aversion program. I know it will be tough. It'll be for your own good and ours too. When cops surround a white supremacist after he shot a black guy at a protest against racism, and they protect him, oh, yeah, go ahead and finish your cigarette. I mean, we don't want to get in the car or, just finish. There was a black guy playing a drum, And the 6 cops took him to the ground and beat his head into the pavement. They didn't even let him finish his drum work. But they let the white supremacist guy who ran into protesters and shot a black guy in broad daylight on TV, live TV. They protect him from the crowd and let him finish his cigarette. I swear to God, if they got him a Whopper, I want damages. Yeah, for emotional distress, whatever it is, these people need to pay. Defund? How about suing their asses? And I don't mean that the money comes out of the general fund. It comes out of the cop budget. And even better, maybe it should come out of the personal accounts of cops who have perpetuated these crimes. Then maybe they'll stop. Maybe. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we start off River City Hash Mondays? Well, at the top, that was with Trump's disastrous responses to the pandemic and these protests against racism. A majority of the country feels the nation is spinning out of control. I would actually probably disagree. We're not spinning out of control. Bill Barr has this exactly in the order he wants. So I don't think it's out of control. I think it's perfectly in order. Yeah, well, we'll see. On the rest of the menu, over 70 Zuckerberg-funded scientists and researchers wrote the Facebook CEO that Trump should not use the social media platform to spread both misinformation and incendiary statements. Stop it, Donnie. Stop it. Okay, my sous chef is snoring. I hope it's not too distracting. It kind of distracts me, but I'll continue. A majority, and I should add, breaking news since I put this together late last evening, a veto-proof majority now of the Minneapolis City Council supports disbanding the city's police department. Well, it's not just the only one. And Bill Barr, Trump, and other officials were personally sued as protesters who were gassed, when they cleared out Lafayette Park for his photo op with an upside-down Bible in front of St. John's Church. Those protesters are going to be suing for damages for their injuries. Good. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Brazil removed months of COVID-19 data to cover up its soaring death toll. Yeah, little Donnie down there in Brazil, he's following the lead. And the French Foreign Affairs Minister said violence against peaceful protesters and journalists is unacceptable. Well, you would expect all that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link is our Patreon button, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring contribution helps us pay our bills, as we have been able to do for almost 10 years now. That's right. Over 9, going on 10 years of continuous 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio broadcast, because you have been able to help us pay our bills. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, can you afford that? Remember when we got to do that with impunity? Well, if you can afford to send that amount of money to us, we can stretch those dollars and continue resisting as the founders originally intended. Thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam on Twitter. And go ahead, follow me there because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media, which I do at Justice Putnam. Isn't that funny? Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Well, I live in small town America, and we had these. People are just, I don't know. Some people are funny, and they get really mad because they're funny. When you point out how funny they are, oh, God, they get mad. Especially if they're right-wingers. They cannot ever admit that they're wrong. And I have noticed that a lot of Trump brats have become exceedingly agitated in the last couple of weeks because they see Donnie totally effing up. So, of course, they got to blame everyone and everything. We're back to Colin Kaepernick being a traitor because he takes a knee. And when it's explained to them once again how he came to the idea of taking a knee, it was from a military guy, because they take a knee at the Lincoln Memorial, the honor guard does. And that did appease them for a little bit, even though they didn't like the idea of a black guy pointing out police racism and violence. They tried to blame it on him being anti-American and hating the flag, when actually it was the military guy that said this is how you respect the dead in the military. You take a knee and you say a prayer. But, according to the Trump brats, the only people who are religious are them. The good Christians are the ones that follow Donnie the God. The bad Christians are the ones that pretty much follow Jesus and his teachings. So this is where we are now. And we had that weird conspiracy theory that busloads and busloads and busloads of what I called microscopic Antifa, taking a little bit of a lift from Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle with the microscopic Chinese that were going to invade the United States. Well, we were going to have busloads and busloads and busloads of microscopic Antifa coming to small towns like Grants Pass, Medford, Rogue River, I guess to steal the ranch dressing white sauce from our pizzas. They're going to destroy our way of life. And we actually had people with open carry guns on the bridge, making sure those busloads of Antifa don't come to our little town. So, of course, I had to bring up, hey, what happened to those busloads of microscopic Antifa? Can we put our guns down now? Our arms are really tired. And I showed a picture of the Burns militia. They're not really close, but I still like the idea. Burns. It's, the town of Burns. They have their own white supremacist militia, and they look like a ragtag army, just like the ones that Barr and Trump are using in D.C. right now. All right. So I guess they're able, that ragtag army, not the militias. I'm getting back to this weird stuff with cops and military and Donnie. The ones that do not identify who they are, who they work for, are kidnapping people and throwing them into minivans and taking them away. I don't like that. I mean, those are KKK guys. And if you fight against them, their friends plus the cops are going to crack your head like an old guy in Buffalo, bleeding out your ear, and then the other cops are going to applaud you for doing that to the old guy? All right. I think that Trump and the Trump brats have awakened the terrible sleeping giant, as Yamamoto referred to the United States when they bombed Pearl Harbor. The silent majority is not the loudmouth Trump brats. They never have been. The law and order crowd has been anything but silent. They are not a silent majority, and they're not even a majority. They're just a bunch of loudmouths who have outsized power because of how loud they are. The silent majority, once again, I'll remind folks, are the everyday folks who go to work, hunker down, just try to pay their bills and get the job done. Their kids are getting their heads cracked. Their parents are getting their heads cracked. Their grandparents are getting their heads cracked, and they're seeing it on TV. And you know that Trump is going to put a clamp down on that. We don't want you to know how many people are dying from COVID, so therefore you go out and make more money so my stocks go up. Jeez. People are seeing it for what it is. And the Trump brats are not anything of a majority. All right? And they're not going to like it when their guy not only loses the election, but they are going to get frog-marched. And I'm talking Bill Barr, too. Really. John Mitchell, Bill Barr. And I would guess Watergate the rest of these crooks. Every single last one. I'm hoping this time Joe doesn't say, oh, well, we shouldn't look backwards. We have to look forwards. No, we need a reconciliation. We need a truth and reconciliation. And I'm not talking about pardoning these people. We need to address the problem, name it, and I am sorry, there needs to be some punishment meted out. And these so-called authority figures who have usurped their authority need to be punished for not only their own crimes, but as an example for others who think they might get away with the same thing. Not anymore. We have one kind of justice in this country. No more of this 2 levels of justice. No more. Please. Well, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's out of the Associated Press by Frank Bajic. Well, dozens of scientists doing research funded by Zuckerberg say Facebook should not be letting Trump use the social media platform to spread both misinformation and incendiary statements. The researchers, including 60 professors at leading U.S. research institutions, wrote the Facebook CEO on Saturday, asking Zuckerberg to, quote, consider stricter policies on misinformation and incendiary language that harms people, end quote, especially during the current turmoil over racial injustice. Mark's having a little bit of a mutiny within his own company. People are quitting right and left. Because I pretty much presume they don't want to be on the wrong side of history no matter how much money they're making. The letter calls the spread of deliberate misinformation and divisive language contrary to the researchers' goals of using technology to prevent and eradicate disease, improve childhood education, and reform the criminal justice system. Their mission, quote, is antithetical to some of the stances that Facebook has been taking, so we are encouraging them to be more on the side of truth and on the right side of history, as we've said in the letter, end quote, said Deborah Marks of Harvard Medical School, one of the 3 professors who organized it. The others are Martin Kampman of the University of California, San Francisco, and Joseph Shepard of the University of Utah. All have grants from a Chan Zuckerberg Initiative program working to prevent, cure, and treat neurodegenerative disorders, including Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. They said the letter had more than 160 signatories, and Shepard said about 10% are employees of foundations run by Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan. The letter objects specifically to Zuckerberg's decision not to at least flag as a violation of Facebook's community standards Trump's post that stated, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts," in response to unrest in Minneapolis over the videotaped killing of George Floyd. The letter's authors call the post a clear statement of inciting violence. Twitter had both flagged and demoted a Trump tweet using the same language. In a statement, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative noted that the philanthropic organization is separate from Facebook. Oh, how convenient. And said, "We are grateful to our staff, partners, and grantees, and respect their right to voice their opinions, including on Facebook policies. But our hands are tied. We can't do anything." Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A now veto-proof majority of the members of the Minneapolis City Council said they support disbanding the city's police department, an aggressive stance that comes just as the state has launched a civil rights investigation after George Floyd's death. 9 of the council's 12 members appeared with activists at a rally in a city park yesterday, Sunday afternoon, and vowed to end policing as the city currently knows it. Council member Jeremiah Ellison promised that the council would dismantle the department. Well, I expect the cops to riot now. It is clear that our system of policing is not keeping our community safe. Our efforts at incremental reform have failed, period. Bender, and that was Lisa Bender, the council president. Bender went on to say she and the 8 other council members that joined the rally are committed to ending the city's relationship with the police force and to end policing as we know it and recreate systems that actually keep us safe. Floyd, of course, a handcuffed black man, died May 25th after a white officer pressed his knee into Floyd's neck, ignoring his "I can't breathe" cries, and holding it there even after Floyd stopped moving. His death sparked protests, some violent, many peaceful, that spread nationwide and around the world as if you didn't know. Community activists have criticized the Minneapolis department for years for what they say is a racist and brutal culture that resists change. The state of Minnesota launched a civil rights investigation of the department last week, and the first concrete changes came Friday in a stipulated agreement in which the city agreed to ban chokeholds and neck restraints. The more complete remaking of the department is likely to unfold in the coming months. Now, disbanding an entire department has happened before. In 2012, with crime rampant in Camden, New Jersey, the city disbanded its police department and replaced it with a new force that covered Camden County. Compton, California, took the same step in 2000, shifting its policing to Los Angeles County. Roger Sollenberger of Salon, by way of Raw Story, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Protesters are suing Trump, William Barr, and a number of federal officials after they were tear-gassed to clear the way for an administration photo op. This case is about the president. We don't usually use that term when associated with Donald Trump, but we have to here because it's a direct quote. And Attorney General of the U.S. ordering the use of violence against peaceful demonstrators who were speaking out against discriminatory police brutality targeted at black people, the complaint reads. The suit was filed on behalf of Black Lives Matter D.C., along with a handful of individual protesters by the ACLU of the District of Columbia, in conjunction with the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and Arnold and Porter, LLP. Along with Trump and Barr, the complaint names Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, Attorney or Army General James McConville, and the heads of the Secret Service, the U.S. Park Police, and the D.C. National Guard, as well as dozens of anonymous officials who carried out the action. The suit, filed in the U.S. District Court of Columbia, seeks a court order declaring that the assault violated the protesters' First and Fourth Amendment rights and affirming that administration officials engaged in a conspiracy to deny those rights. It also demands a court order barring officials from repeating the action, as well as restitution for trauma and injury sustained from chemicals and physical blows. What happened to our members Monday evening here in the nation's capital was an affront to all our rights, April Goggins, head organizer of Black Lives Matter DC, said in a statement. The death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor at the hands of police officers has reignited the rage, pain, and deep sadness our community has suffered for generations, she added. We won't be silenced by tear gas and rubber bullets. Now is our time to be heard. Of course, Barr went on the talk shows yesterday and said it's not tear gas in any way. Pepper spray's not a chemical. Yeah, it's an herb irritant, apparently. And those aren't rubber bullets. They're made out of vinyl. Come on, please. Scott Michelman, legal director of the ACLU's Washington office, was frank in describing the gravity of the moment. It was an attack, just a flagrant assault on our constitutional rights, on these people's civil rights and liberties. We average about 600 to 708 intakes per year, but that night we received 229, he said, referring to requests for legal action filed with his office. The majority of them were connected to Lafayette, and almost all of the rest to Swan Street, he added, referring to the Washington neighborhood where protesters were gassed in a private home where they had been given refuge after the curfew. When asked whether there was case law precedent for such an injunction, Michelman pointed out that while it is not unusual for courts to issue stays on policies, this circumstance of this incident appears singular. I'm not sure anything like this has ever happened, he said. It's something like I've never seen before. And the complaint itself makes the case. The peaceful assembly of people seeking systemic change in the criminal justice system, like the assembly of plaintiffs and others on June 1st, 2020, in Lafayette Square, is based on a decades-old history of civil rights activism in this nation, it says, referencing a litany of landmark moments such as the 1965 March on Selma, Alabama. The Lafayette Square assault was violence against black people and their supporters committed by state actors, the complaint says. What differentiates the actions here from others is that the President and Attorney General of the United States ordered the violence. The morning of the attack on the demonstrators, Trump on a conference call with governors pushed them to dominate your city and your state. In Washington, we're going to do something people have not seen before. And they did. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Chain will keep us together. After the crash of 2008, a pseudonymous computer math person published a solution to a believed to be unsolvable problem. How do you maintain the integrity of transactions in a decentralized commercial system? How do you know who has spent what without some central thing keeping track, like, say, a bank? His or her solution was a transaction registration protocol wherein a transaction records its own occurrence while also containing the history of its preceding transactions. Each of these blocks of data would be verified by preceding blocks in the chain. Therefore, in order to mess with this transaction data, you'd have to target every single block in the chain, a task so impractical as to be virtually impossible. So, with this blockchain protocol or process, you could keep track of what you spent in a verified way with no central organization. This development allowed people to make their own virtual currencies or cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin. You learn all of this information in the first few minutes of Alex Winter's latest documentary, Trust Machine, The Story of Blockchain. It's worth a watch, but keep your attention cap on because once it starts, it's off faster than I speak. Yeah, I hear your complaints. Trust Machine moves via a series of interviews backboned by quiet narration by Rosario Dawson. It's snazzy without being slick, and if it has a weakness, it's not in its filmmaking, but in the limitations of its subject matter. Blockchain, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies are so new, we've yet to see their full effect. So all Winter can say is they could revolutionize individual commerce, could revolutionize national finance, could revolutionize how artists get funded. Meanwhile, a whole lot of middlemen look to be cut out of the financial processes that they've been leeching off of for generations. What I really want to see is Trust Machine 2, the blockchain documentary that Alex Winter makes 15 years from now. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen relief can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC. For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. At the outset of the Civil War, public opinion in the North was generally unfavorable to immediate abolition. Some favored the status quo. Others favored gradual emancipation. Those demanding complete and immediate abolishment of slavery, called abolitionists, were a minority. Others, content with outlawing slavery in the territories and newly admitted states, would leave it in place in the South. These were known as Free Soilers after a political party that advocated this solution to the slavery issue. As the Civil War proceeded, policy toward slavery became part of the North's war strategy. Not long after the outbreak of war, Congress passed the Confiscation Act of 1861 that forbade the Union military from returning slaves to slaveholders. In July 1862, it passed a second such act, emancipating all slaves owned by rebel slaveholders that came under Union jurisdiction. By then, Lincoln was secretly devising a two-part executive order, the Emancipation Proclamation, that would attack the Confederacy by liberating its slaves, although none in Union territory. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1904. That was the day that John Carley, a Union miner, was shot down in Dunnville, Colorado. Carley was part of a strike in the Cripple Creek gold mining region. The miners had gone out on strike in support of workers at the Standard Mill in Colorado City, which processed the mined ore. Colorado Governor Peabody was determined to break the strike. He called in the state militia, who joined forces with company Army gun thugs, with 1,000 rifles and 60,000 rounds of ammunition to back them up. General Sherman Bell, a veteran of Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Rider Squad in the Spanish-American War, led the National Guard. During the strike, one of General Bell's deputies is said to have declared, "To hell with the Constitution! We aren't going by the Constitution." This pretty much summed up General Bell's approach to the conflict. The militia began to round up Union miners. More than 1,500 miners were captured and given a so-called trial by the militia. 238 of these miners were then deported from the region. They were shipped by train to Denver, Kansas, and New Mexico, and warned not to return. The militia learned of a group of pro-union workers at a small encampment known as Dunnville. General Bell loaded up more than 100 militiamen and company deputies on a train and headed for the camp. There they exchanged gunfire with the miners. 65 miners, armed with just 10 guns among them, had little chance against the well-armed company men. John Carley was killed, and 14 miners were arrested. The Union was crushed in the sights of 1,000 guns. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Stick
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Ash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 50 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be a tad warmer than we were over the weekend. Should be in the low to mid 70s. We were considerably cooler, had quite a bit of rain on the weekend, as a matter of fact. Sun and clouds mixed today. Winds will be light and variable. Then tonight, lows should be in the mid 50s, cloudy early with some clearing expected late. Winds will remain light and variable, with partly cloudy skies tomorrow, high near 80. With winds out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County of Southern Oregon stand at 69, which it had gone up to last week late, with no deceased recorded. Grass pollen remains very high right outside the window of the mothership here. The regional air quality index for Southern Oregon is in the good range at 25 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at 9. Slather on the SP 30 or 50. Do it. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.32 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 96%. Wow. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 59 and cloudy with more coronavirus. Paris is 65 and mostly cloudy with civil unrest and coronavirus. Rome is 77 and fair with civil unrest and coronavirus. Kyiv is 85 and fair with coronavirus. We don't know about the civil unrest. Let's see. Kabul is 80 degrees and fair with a war going on and coronavirus. Hong Kong is 80 and mostly cloudy with coronavirus, and they've been having civil unrest for quite a while. Tokyo is 74 and clear with coronavirus. I don't know about the civil unrest. Sydney, Australia is 56 and mostly cloudy with coronavirus and protesting racism around the world. San Francisco, California is 56 and sunny with coronavirus and civil unrest. And New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with coronavirus and protesting against police racism and violence. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anna Mono of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Brazil removed from public view months of data on its COVID-19 pandemic as Jair Bolsonaro, the president, defended delays and changes to official record-keeping of the world's second-largest coronavirus outbreak. Oh, you know what? We're number one. Yay, number one! Brazil's health ministry removed the data from a website that had documented the epidemic over time and by state and municipality. The ministry also stopped giving a total count of confirmed cases, which have shot past 672,000, more than anywhere outside of the United States, or a total death toll which passed Italy this week, nearing 36,000 by Saturday. The cumulative data does not reflect the moment the country is in, Bolsonaro said, citing a note from the ministry. Other actions are underway to improve the reporting of cases and confirmation of diagnoses, probably so that he can cover it up. Probably? Bolsonaro has played down the dangers of the pandemic, replaced medical experts in the health ministry with military officials, and argued against state lockdowns to fight the virus, hobbling the country's public health response. Neither Bolsonaro nor the ministry gave a reason for erasing most of the data on the covid.saud.gov.br website, which had been a key public resource for tracking the pandemic. The page was taken down on Friday and reloaded Saturday with a new layout and just a fraction of the data, reflecting only deaths, cases, and recoveries within the last 24 hours. Late on Saturday, the ministry reported 27,075 new confirmed infections and 904 related deaths since its Friday update. The government drew criticism this week for pushing back the release of its daily tally, previously available around 5 p.m., but released in recent days near 10. Oh, how nice. Transparency of information is a powerful instrument for combating the pandemic. Paulo Geronimo de Sousa, head of the Brazilian Press Association, said, trying to silence the press at this late hour is what the government is doing. Asked by journalists about the delayed release, Bolsonaro needled the nation's most watched news program, Jornal Nacional, which begins at 8:30 p.m. There goes a story for Jornal Nacional, he joked, adding that the show likes to say Brazil has the record for deaths.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
The ever-present anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Violence against peaceful protesters and journalists is unacceptable, whether in the U.S. or elsewhere, France's Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said in a newspaper interview published yesterday, Sunday. Asked about protests and rioting that have swept across U.S. cities since the death of unarmed black man George Floyd in police custody in Minneapolis, Le Drian told Le Telegram that it was necessary to let people demonstrate freely. Any act of violence committed against peaceful protesters or journalists is unacceptable in the U.S. or elsewhere, he told the Brittany regional newspaper. And I should mention, Brittany is fairly, kind of conservative. Video footage showing Floyd laying face down on a Minneapolis street as a white police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes caused outrage. Protests, sometimes marked by looting, drew a strong response from police in some U.S. cities. That's putting it mildly. Le Drian, who is from the coastal region of Brittany, also reiterated France's determination to defend access to British waters for French fishermen during talks over Britain's future relationship with the EU. There is a major issue, the access for our fishermen to British waters in conditions that are as close as possible to the existing ones, Le Drian said. And I can assure you that I will make sure that London guarantees them visibility, continuity in technical standards, and the access you need. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and you know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.